thank you very much for joining us in Startup Grind again, actually.
Thanks for the invitation, Alex. Doing great, thanks.
Jordi, is directly related to the story of Startup Grind or indirectly related because Startup Grind in Barcelona began at ITNIC 6 years ago, right? It was on March 29th, 2014, when we did a presentation event with Bernat Ferrero, who at the time was the CEO and founder of ITNIC. And they very kindly invited us and hosted us for 3-4 events, actually, at the very beginning. So we were eternally grateful to ITNIC. We didn't stay there for long, but we always felt like home, and definitely we have always kept the good relationship, right? Jordi actually came to one of our conferences 1.5 years ago because he hosted an interview with Pepe from Chartboost. And now it's time to interview him because, long story short, I mean, Jordi is a very active actor in the startup ecosystem in Barcelona. Among other spells, he was the former CTO at Red Booth, also previously known as Teambox. He's also an angel investor. He invests through the ITNIC One Fund. And right now he's the CEO and founder at Factorial, right? Jordi, I know I've missed a lot of things there. Maybe you want to give some small background, some small introduction for yourself for like a minute or two.
I mean, that's a pretty fair, short background. So yeah, I'm a computer engineer by education. I never finished the degree though. So I started my career as a programmer, quickly joined a startup, became the CTO, late co-founder, learned all the stuff about business, and actually found it, a lot more interesting that, many developers think about this sort of side of the business at the beginning of their career. So I switched into a business development role, which meant that we were working on kind of doing partnerships with the big fish in the industry. So Teambox Red Booth was a tiny startup, 30, 40, 50 people company based in Barcelona, San Francisco. And we were doing partnerships with Cisco, IBM, Google, Microsoft, like huge tech companies. And that was actually really, really valuable for our company in terms of growth and then potential M&A, corporate development and stuff like that. And as you said, for the last 3.5 years, focused on Factorial, which is the HR software startup. We started with Bernat Ferrero and Pau Ramon. Bernat previously at ITNIC and Camalún, and Pau previously at Red Booth as well. So the three of us started this company, and very happy where things are at the moment.
Actually, I want to say, I didn't know this part about you transitioning to the dark side of development, which is business development, right? I, as a former developer, I'm also in that part. So how was that experience? How did your technical background help you develop business?
So it was a pretty unique situation in the company where the original founder, also the founder and original CEO left the company. And then there was like an enterprise sales kind of CEO who was not very techy. So when he was doing business conversations with partners, investors and stuff like that, he lacked this, technical knowledge in a very technical company. So he always brought me in as his right hand. And then he's like, this is not the CTO. The CTO should be building the product. And we need somebody who is very tech savvy on the business side. And we kind of made this role for me, which was the VP Business Development and Platform, which was like the longest job title I've ever had. Now it's just CEO, which is way more concise.
And founder, CEO and founder.
Founder and CEO, yeah. They say that founder is just a historical label and CEO is the actual job title, which I kind of agree with. I think Paul Graham said that. So yeah, that was super interesting. And I learned that this intersection between business and technology is definitely what interests me. Pure technology and non-technological businesses don't attract me that much. When these two things combine, then it's just like an infinite adventure.
It's interesting because I know quite a few people using this profile, like people like me, people like you. Funnily enough, we're never in the same company. You will only find one per company, right? Maybe we're difficult to work with, or I don't know what, but they need to be unique in the company. So I don't know what's there. Now, how about you tell us a little bit, because a lot of people will know what Factorial is, but for those who don't know what Factorial is, before we go into the technical questions, let's hear the pitch what you guys do.
Sure. So we started the company from the frustration of having run organizations and led organizations where we had the support of great tech software and like technological partners such as Salesforce for the sales organization, HubSpot for marketing, and so on and so forth. But we didn't have any good solution for actually developing our people, talent, the organization, knowing if we were fair with compensation, kind of not wasting too much time with bureaucracy and stuff like that. And we just said, people management sucks. It's not something that we're doing really well, and there is nobody next to us helping us with cutting edge technology to make this the best employer in Barcelona, in Europe, in the world, etc. So we looked in the market. We saw that large enterprises had some promising vendors company called Workday, which was transitioning HR technology from on-premise to the cloud, which sounds really old, but this is still the battle in the large enterprises. And we didn't find anything decent for small and medium-sized companies. So we decided to start Factorial, which is meant to be your HR partner, your HR software partner. That is a very easy to use, the consumer-like, very intuitive, fun to interact with actually HR software. Lets you take care of everything that has to do with people management, compensation, on-offboarding, vacation management, running payroll, everything that has to do with your people for a medium-sized organization. We started in late summer 2016, so 3.5 years ago. The three founders, as I said, Bernat, Pau, and myself, we self-funded the first year of operations. Then we raised a little bit of business angel capital, which was basically friends at that stage, because it was like people who invested in our previous companies and who trusted in us. And then we raised a little seed round later on, I think mid 2018, and we just went on fundraising a Series A.
Which is actually what sort of has saved you from this pandemic, right? I was listening to the ITNIC podcast, by the way, and that's a really good podcast. Everybody,
Thanks.
if you have a chance, just follow their podcast, because it's extremely insightful. If you know the real stories of the companies from Barcelona, it's really good. I always learn a lot of stuff I didn't know about the companies I thought I knew. So, and you were mentioning that luckily enough, you were about to receive the fundraising cash from the round you did last year, right? Before the pandemic hit, right? So we are in an entirely different scenario, because you actually completed your fundraising, right? So how did that help you and the strategy? Let's talk about, going into the pandemic and how to deal with it.
So basically, I think the biggest axis when you're doing crisis management is the cash position. Like, cash is everything when you're running a business, and in many economic aspects, like everything else can be figured out if there is enough cash in the bank. So at the end of 2019, we were in a good cash position because the business was growing, the expenses were growing as well, but not as fast as revenues. And we went on raising a Series A, which meant that we had maybe around a short year of runway before fundraising, which means we were in a comfortable position, but we wanted to invest more aggressively in product development and in growth. So we decided to go fundraising, and at the same time, we started executing under the assumption that the fundraising was going to happen, which means we increased burn rate significantly, right? So we almost doubled burn rate in a couple of months, because we hired a ton of software developers. We grew our sales team, we grew our marketing team, we started hiring customer success people, and then we went on fundraising. It was a very successful exercise. And then, shit hits the fan. And basically the whole world is collapsing. We had very, very good support from our investors, who were kind of telling us everything's going to be fine. We'll make it through this. It doesn't matter what's going on in the news. It doesn't matter if countries lock down. It doesn't matter if institutional investors kind of freak out a little bit. We're here to have your back and so on. But as days went on, and you saw these laws in Spain that were forbidding foreign investments of over 10% ownership in certain sectors. You hear about countries kind of limiting the import-export, the trade, stuff like that. It's like, shit, we're not talking to local investors, we're talking to international investors. And if our country does something weird, their country does something weird, the bank is suddenly imposing restrictions and stuff. It got a little bit stressful at the end of the process, but happy to say everything went through very smoothly. It was hard. Obviously, a lot of exceptions had to be made. Like it was not, a usual transaction, but it got done. And now we have like a lot of runway, which for me is like the number one crisis management step is like, make sure you have money in the bank. We do have money in the bank. So now if you want, like there's a lot of other dimensions to take care of.
Saved by the bell. Actually, some of the startups in the Startup Grind Barcelona community, they were not that lucky, and maybe their fundraising process was disrupted or interrupted altogether by the crisis, right? What would be your advice for these people, considering you have been in both sides of the table? You have been fundraising, but you're also an investor. So what would you tell them? Maybe let's not figure out what would have happened with Factorial, but from your point of view, what should they be focusing on if their fundraising just didn't work out?
I mean, if you want, we're actually on the three sides of a weird table because as a founder CEO, I just went on fundraising. We also invest from ITNIC as business angels, but we're also providers of many companies as Factorial, and we serve HR, right, which is a heavily impacted function in businesses right now, which means that we're seeing a lot of layoffs. We're seeing a lot of cost reductions. We're seeing companies closing operations. And it's happening, and it's happening like in a ridiculous percentage. Like the world is stopped, and like people just go home and retreat, and kind of everybody reads the news and freak out a little bit. But in the business ecosystem, it's ridiculous the massive impact that this is having. Like we have some customers just close permanently. We have many customers who saw a reduction in the workforce, either because they would apply these like ERTEs here in Spain as temporary workforce reductions, or they would ask their employees to kind of take vacations now and stuff like that. So definitely the first step is to tighten the costs, try to get as close to positive cash flow as possible, and that means bring more money in, which is tough right now. So in many cases, the only way to do that is stop or freeze unnecessary costs. Like even we slow down hiring. Like we have plenty of money in the bank, but we slowed down hiring in some areas, and we stopped hiring in sales because like people are not buying right now. They're reading the news about what's happening around the world, and they're kind of keeping things in slow motion and close to halt. But many companies, what they have to do is actually like cut costs. Everything that's non-essential, everything that's non-personnel, obviously investments in growth, investments in future projects, this might need to be delayed and stopped. And maybe some companies are even divesting, like selling some assets that they might have acquired for the future, but now they need to take care of the present first. Fundraising wise, sadly, almost all investors I know are kind of tweeting and sharing this message of like, we're open for business. But then in high trust environments, that's not what's happening. Like the reality is everybody's slowing down. Institutional investors slow down because, even if VCs, the only thing they do is actually invest in, growing companies, and they have nothing better to do right now than to invest in fast growing companies the same way as they always do. The problem is the people who give them money are actually kind of trying to manage the crisis. And many of those limited partners, as they're called, are governments. So some others are large companies that are suddenly, facing a massive crisis on their own. Exactly. Or, they're banks who are managing wealth, who is now asking to be a little bit more conservative. So maybe slow down on venture and kind of go back to liquidity. So reality is it's a tough moment to raise money. I think it's a different story with business angels. Healthy individuals are probably going to be healthy individuals unless their source of wealth is suddenly affected. Like somebody's a business owner and their business is going down because the travel industry. Other than that, I've seen business angel activity still up, and there is some sort of solidarity feeling of people who feel like I know it's tough to be fundraising now. So if somebody needs funds and I'm interested, I will not play games, and I will try to move fast and make sure that they can get funded fast. So we're as active as always, actually, in terms of investing. We closed 2 rounds, so 2 investments 1 month ago. And, we're now discussing projects as we always do.
Yeah, exactly. And there was quite a bit of discussion on Twitter because there was this demolishing article by TechCrunch saying, VCs saying they're open for business. That's bullshit. And pretty much every VC in the world or every business angel started answering. And I think a bit of projecting as well, right? Saying, no, oh, we signed one deal. It's like, okay, yeah. Anyways, I wanted to know, how
I
did
mean,
this
things are
affect
getting
you?
signed, but
Yeah,
they were almost all previous commitments. That still
exactly.
makes sense because we all hear of term sheets getting pulled, which means
Exactly.
firm offers that are not really happening. And
Exactly.
to be fair to VCs, I mean, obviously they're projecting this image of open for business, which is not
Yeah,
really what we see happening. But they're also on containment phase right now, so they're helping their existing investments sometimes
correct.
pour more money into the company, help them restructure, help
Correct.
them, with plan B, plan C, plan D, and so on. So the VCs that I work with are currently very busy with the companies that are like massive consumer, like travel and such industries that are kind of struggling a little bit more at the moment.
And yeah, exactly. And also another thing that it's also true is when you contact a VC, usually it takes months for you to get the money, right? It's not like they invest in you the very same day. So you want to start this relationship. And most of the times it's too early for this VC to invest in you. So it's worth it to contact them, have a first exploratory call now, because maybe the investment will come a few months down the line, right? So let's talk about more about Factorial. How did this affect you? Because my first thought, my initial thought when the shit hit the fan a few weeks ago was like, okay, oh, that's gonna be good for Factorial maybe, right? Because there will be more activity in the HR field, but obviously I don't know if you charge per seat or not. So maybe if the companies are laying off people, definitely you're downgrading a little bit of your financials. So how did that affect you and obviously your clients, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, this crisis affects us in three different ways. The first one we already touched, which is,
Yeah,
risk in the cash position, which, we overcame. So we have money in the bank and that risk
correct.
is now mitigated. The other two axes is one, sales. So the appetite for HR leaders to invest in a platform that helps them, digitize everything, automate workflows and bring everybody on the same platform and get stuff together more efficiently. So the need is higher than before, but the willingness to spend money, to experiment, to kind of deploy new tools that are essential at the moment is definitely lower. So in the short term, we did notice that many people are interested in trying us out, but it's a harder time to have like 1 year, 2 year discount conversations on like, we're going to make an investment here and this is going to pay off
Mhm.
soon. Like, people are not at the time of making investments mostly right now. So we did notice a slowdown in terms of like larger deals, but what we decided to do to kind of tackle this or embrace the current situation is like, okay, so there is a higher need of our solution right now, but there is higher friction to close deals right now. So
Mhm.
let's just postpone the business conversation and let's just provide as much value as we can to as many people as we can. So the first thing we did, and I think that was mid-March, right at the beginning of the lockdowns in Europe, is we extended indefinitely the free trial of our product. So
Mhm.
anybody who is suddenly in need for a platform to centralize their people information, they can just use Factorial, and we're not going to ask them to pay for it for the time being. Meaning, once things start to calm down, once lockdowns start flexibilizing and so on, then we will go back to our time trial mode. But right now,
Mhm.
you can use the product without having to pay, so that you can have some solution. And that we saw that is really helping many more companies on board and adopt our solution and kind of just postponing the buying decision until a later moment. And then the third dimension, if you want, so I said the first one is cash, the second one
Yep.
is sales conversations. The third one is the long-lasting impact that this is having in businesses. Like, if you want, we can talk about society, but particularly in how businesses are managed. And there is one very painful reality, which is many companies realize that they should be able to do businesses without having to physically be in the office. And I know you are very
Exactly.
vocal about being a full remote company. And you kind of like a extreme high technical company, but our customers range from restaurant changes,
Mhm.
restaurant chains to factories to startups to marketing agencies, like all sort of customers we have. And many of them couldn't operate outside of the office. So now they're realizing that they need to have all the documents in the cloud. They need to have secure workflow management software. They need to have e-signature. Like signing contracts and signing layoffs, unfortunately, is being a huge problem for companies who suddenly need to implement an HR policy, such as asking everybody to not work for 1 month and not being able to physically go to the employee and making them sign. So we saw a huge uptick in e-signature. So this is going to have a long-lasting impact, meaning many companies will now painfully realize that they cannot rely on paper, face-to-face, like informal processes, that they need to structure all of their people information. They need to create digital workflows for everything. And that's going to create a higher demand for more traditional companies for our products. So I think in the long term, this is going to accelerate some sort of digitalization of HR.
Oh, definitely. And some companies have realized too late that they needed to move not only to to digital, but to cloud, or to even to accept remote work, right? I was trying to open a business account with a big bank, one of the biggest banks in Spain, perhaps the biggest, and they didn't have that functionality 100% online. So let's circle back to that thing you mentioned about offering your product for free, because it's a tricky thing. Some companies, some SaaS companies are taking advantage of this because it's free marketing. And I don't know, I have a very, very strong opinion on this, but isn't it a double-edged sword? Because
Yes.
you will be onboarding a lot of free customers who will take advantage of your software. And once the situation goes better to normal, they will be charged.
Yeah.
And maybe some of them, there will be an outrage because it's like, oh, this is, you were taking advantage of me for this month, and now you need to make me pay. So you will have invested a lot of effort and resources in these companies, and potentially being a backlash for your company. So how do you expect this to pan out?
It's a very tricky thing. One comment though, it's not free marketing because it's costing us a ton of money, since we are giving away our software for free. So that's what like we would have made a lot more money.
Because you get a structure, because the cost of SaaS per se.
No. But if we didn't, so the cost of the servers is very low.
Exactly.
But if we don't offer it for free, people still buy it. Meaning, we're
exactly.
giving money, we're leaving money on the table. So it's definitely not free marketing. So there is three things, right? So when we decided to do that, we discussed this a lot, because first of all, this is something that we believe is good for our business, which is also our responsibility as business owners and managers. Exactly. We think that postponing the sales conversation in the current circumstance is good. We always want to first add value and then collect this value back as revenues. As a funded startup or VC-backed startup, we have the ability to delay this, so our cash flow cycle can be longer than if we were bootstrapped, where you're forced to kind of like always be charging enough so that you can keep running your business. We have some margin there of operation. So first of all, we thought this was good for the business. Second of all, we thought this was a service that we could do for companies who needed a solution like ours, and they were now definitely not in the right time to buy this. And actually, we decided to not just extend the free trial, but include e-signature in the free trial, which costs us money, which means that if a company that has zero budget decides to try our tool or use our tool, they can now digitally, legally sign HR documents, and it's going to cost them nothing. And we're actually paying for each signature. So it's, it's a way to.
What product is it? What product are you using?
We're using Signaturit as an API. So we're integrated into them. This is transparent to the customer. The customer, they can't see the URLs that they say Signaturit and stuff, but it's fully integrated into Factorial. So you upload the document, you say request signature, and this sends email to the signers. And then there's a little task in Factorial, and anyway, the whole process goes smoothly through our product, but it's actually backed by an API that does only this. So we are paying Signaturit for the service that we're now giving away to companies who need a HR digital solution and cannot afford anything at the moment. So the second aspect is it's a contribution that we are making to the ecosystem. And the third thing, as you say,
Exactly.
it's marketing, right? And this is
Yeah.
the worst of them, because in my opinion, you don't want to make marketing when something is costing lives, when something is
Exactly.
costing jobs, when something is costing, the economy
That's my
a
take on
huge
it.
impact. So for us, it was like, okay, let's not bother HR leaders with sales conversations right now. We can afford to postpone this conversation. So we think it's better for our business to not bother people with HR conversations. And second of all, let's try to make our tiny contribution to the ecosystem, to the world, by offering our solution at no cost for companies, and we will even pay obviously the servers, but even the e-signatures ourselves, so that if somebody needs to suddenly start signing whatever ERTES or hiring or payslips or whatever, they can do that through our platform. And then eventually we're a business, right? So when we provide value, we want to get value back. We want to get revenues. So we will talk to these companies and say, hey, this crisis is kind of like over. Companies are back in their offices. I hope you enjoyed using our service. Like we need to talk. Eventually you'll need to pay for this.
And how about, because you mentioned the free trial, I take it it's only for the new customers, right? For new signups. But how about for your current customers? Has there been any sort of plan to also compensate them for this? Because if other companies joining now, they get it for free, why am I paying, right?
Yeah.
I know it's a tough discussion, but how did you do it?
It is. Many came to us saying this is unfair. And we said, look, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to help ensure that everybody has a people platform that they can use to enable remote office and stuff like that. You already have one. You're happy with yours. You're paying for it. So good. Let's move on to help somebody who doesn't have one. And then what we've done is some of our so basically that's it. That's a conversation. Some people liked it more. Everybody understood it. Like everybody tries, or not everybody. Some people try to get advantage of these circumstances, but they also understand that it's not the right time to kind of press too hard on things like that. Some of our existing customers said, look, we're struggling. We have customers who have been doing temporary layoffs, and then with them we've had like special discounts and special like extended non-subscription periods and stuff like that. But only when we have seen that they have really been struggling and kind of freezing all their contracts for 2 months. And obviously, since we're an HR platform, we see that. So if they tell us they're doing that, they cannot lie to us.
Oh no, also if we had time, or maybe if you had time to prepare, maybe you would have done better. You would have come with another solution, right? But we're kind of improvising here. So that goes to my next question is actually, how did you actually communicate? When did you start communicating with the team? How did you set the expectations on the first weeks, right? And who was communicating? I take it was you as the CEO?
Yeah, it's always me, like all company communications. And communication is something I take very, very seriously, externally, but also internally. And I try to centralize that globally. Of course, every manager has leadership over their teams, but when it's something company-wide, is always me. So it's funny because the week before the official lockdown in Spain, so we're based in Barcelona, obviously, and the week before the official lockdown is when people started talking a lot about we should probably implement some social distancing measures. And it's funny that I think it was really 24 to 20 to 48 hours maximum, a period from when we said, and we officially communicated to everybody. It's like, look, it sounds like social distancing is for the better. So if you want to work from home, feel free to do that. As a company, we always had a remote friendly policy. Now it's getting more friendly than ever. We're also trying to implement some hygiene measures in the office, like getting this alcohol sanitizer, and like separating the desks and stuff like that. Then next morning we said, okay, everybody who can afford to work from home, doesn't have whole family at home and has some quiet space and so on, we ask you to stay at home. And then I think later that day we say, okay, the office is closed. You cannot come to the office. You have to work from home, right? So it was very fast. It was very fast from hey, feel free to do that to you have to do that. And then a couple of days later, the government said that to everybody. I think in our case, everybody had to work from home at least one day previous to that, but we never had the entire company working from home. And obviously very few people work from home for a month, which I think now we're already at the fifth week of remote working at Factorial. So the first week was challenging. We lost all the social interactions. We are remote. We were a remote friendly company, but not a remote first company, meaning we had many meetings where people forgot to Zoom.
Before we go into remote, let's focus first on the communication. So how did you convey the message, and with which frequency were you talking to the team?
So when something is kind of like serious, I email because Slack is full of and then I copy it to Slack. So when people get an email to the whole company from me, they know it's important. So it was like daily emails for a few days, and kind of like, this is what we're doing, this is what's happening. At the beginning of this, I was also very concerned about misinformation. I mean, I still am concerned about misinformation, but especially at the beginning, we went from nobody hearing coronavirus ever to everybody being an epidemiologist and knowing everything about bats and China and stuff like that.
Everybody's an expert now.
Yeah. So I'm very wary of that. So I was also encouraging everybody to make their own opinions, to kind of, form their own opinions based on scientific trusted sources like the World Health Organization, and not newspapers or politicians who go live on TV saying what's happening on a health science matter. So the first days was both like, stay safe, but be curious and make your own decisions, and don't trust whatever you read on a WhatsApp group or Twitter or even a newspaper. And it was emails until everybody was at home. And then from then on, we did a combination of Slack, as we always do, Zoom, as we always do. And we also started using Loom, Loom. It's like, the voice messages of WhatsApp, where you just record a little message and send them. So it's video version of that on a computer.
I was looking for that. I'm actually recording videos of myself, sending them to my partners when I want to say something long without interruptions, but needs to be spoken. So it's asynchronous, let's say, video meetings.
So that's exactly what Loom is. And
I'm going to write it down.
We have shared investors. They got in the first round from Point 9 Capital, which is also an investor of Factorial. So that's why we know that now they grew a lot, and they raised a lot of funds in the US. As well, and they're doing really well. So it's a really simple, really simple but neat product, and we also use it. So you record yourself, no screen, camera or no camera, and then you just say, hey, have a great week. We're going to do this, and that. We'll see each other on Friday, but if you have any questions, blah, blah, blah. Like, you just record something, and you just send the link to everybody. And for me, it's much faster to kind of improvise a 5-minute pitch than to write down a 2-page letter, which would be the same amount of information. And it's also more personal. It's I don't know. We started doing that, which is surprisingly effective.
Video, that's something I discovered recently, right? Because even though, my company, we're 100% remote, hard remote, no office, we've been like this for 6 years. So with my partners, even though we host a weekly meeting, for instance, there are weeks in which we're extremely busy. We cannot have that meeting, right? But I have the need, or recently I have seen that I have the need to tell them something via voice or video without interruptions, right? Because one of my partners, he's like interrupting me all the time. He's really good at what he does, but he always interrupts, right? And what I did is record myself on QuickTime, because you can record yourself with QuickTime and upload it to Dropbox. So what advantage does Loom offer in this regard? Just automation of that and just make it more seamless?
Press a button and a link gets copied to the clipboard. That's it.
Right.
Like, I mean, that's why I said it's very simple, right? So as you're a developer yourself, I am a developer myself, you could build an MVP of Loom in 3 hours, the same way you could build an MVP of Slack in 2 days. It just works. It works really well. Then it has some editing features, it has privacy settings, etc. We also started using that a lot for communicating to customers. But that's not because of the coronavirus situation. That's just because we like to record videos and send them to our customers.
And how about the meetings? Because I heard you several times mentioning this, and let's touch base on this. So you are used to do management by wandering around, because that's a concept I just learned from you.
Yes.
Which is basically just touching base with everybody you just bump into in the office, and then kind of update each other and see how things are going. But now you can do this in a remote environment, right? I think that one of the main mistakes companies do when transitioning to hard remote is they try to replicate everything they do before. Like, oh, we do all of these things, all these meetings, all these, procedures, all these workflows, and now we gotta have exactly the same thing online. Well, maybe some of these things, they don't make sense, right? How are you doing with this? What's the struggle you found, and how did you solve it?
Yeah. So for me, the best thing of this confinement has been my individual contributor time, right? So I have time to focus on things because I just switch off notifications, like close the door.
Yeah.
And then, I can be 2 or 3 hours full focus, which is impossible for me at the office. It's impossible to be 2 hours without somebody walking by and requiring my attention for something. On the downside, the worst thing for me is I cannot wander around. I cannot just walk around the office. And I don't mean it as a 19th century or 20th century boss who kind of looks over the shoulders of people.
Yeah.
I usually walk around the office and sit next to somebody or between two people and start chatting with them. Like I try to go somewhere where they're not super focused with their like headphones on and staring at the screen, but maybe they're talking to each other and I just join the conversation. And then first of all, I care about their lives and how they're doing and what they did on the weekend or what they plan to do next weekend. And how their families are and stuff like that. And second of all, you're like, what are they working on? How do they like the new team that they just joined? How is the new hire going? Can they be helpful with the onboarding? Can I be helpful with the onboarding and stuff like that? So this is something I'm used to do a lot. And it's an important chunk of my normal days. And this is very hard to do remote. So the first week I was of fully remote confinement, I was quite anxious about not having that. Then the second week, I went a little bit too much in, and I was like zoom all the time, talking to everybody via video conference and calling people, and sometimes and that was too much. And now I'm kind of trying to stabilize into, let's make sure I speak to a few people every day, not necessarily my meetings, but like a few other people than those that I already.
So you
have.
randomize as well between the team members.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, it's not. Scientifically randomized, but I kind of think I didn't speak to this person in a while. The problem is there are some new hires I've never seen face to face. That's crazy. There's like 10 people in Factorial I've never met, and they work with us because we onboarded them the last couple of weeks.
You're 76 people now.
We're 76 people. We onboarded, I think, 10 to 12 people since we are fully remote.
All right.
Which is crazy. Onboarding people remotely is definitely trickier than face-to-face, right? We're going to go back to the office to somebody who has been working with us for already 1 month, and I will not know, I will not even recognize and be able to say, oh, you are Alex, like.
Exactly. Yeah, circling back to one thing you briefly mentioned is that the need to focus, that you're finding focus time right now because you're shutting down all notifications. Funnily enough, that also happens with me, that I'm used to remote working with a hard model, right? But I think that most of the time I have freed up is because I don't go to in-person meetings, right? I just noticed that some days I've got like 3, 4, 5 meetings even. And by the end of after the 5th meeting, I have already worked for 8 hours or even 9 hours, but I haven't produced anything, right?
Yeah.
And it's really hard to deal with this because you feel, first of all, that you haven't worked at all and that you haven't produced. But that's a false feeling because those meetings might be really substantial, right?
Yeah.
And so it's hard to deal with this. How are you dealing with this change of mentality? Have you found any similar situations as well related to this?
I think going back to the evolution or the transition of this last few weeks, for me, week 2 was extreme. And one of the things I did is, as always, my calendar ends up being full, like back-to-back things.
Yeah.
But when it's full of like physical things, there is the coffee, there is lunch meetings, there is like things around the office. So there is a lot of off time in between things. But when you have back-to-back video calls, it's exhausting because you're like, like now, boom, talking, or usually like making decisions, discussing, debating, creating, and then you disconnect, and then you connect to another one, and it's like boom again. Like there is no 10-minute, let's walk to get a coffee and come back, let's order lunch, let's do stuff like that. And usually, like lunch ends up happening in front of the computer, which I hate, but somehow ends up happening these days. So this was very productive, but on the other hand, leaves, like, I think there is a lot of value in these gaps where you can prepare a little bit. Sometimes you prepare emotionally, like, okay, I need to relax a little bit because it's going to be a difficult conversation. So I want to go there, with my best energy and stuff like that. So if you're like back to back to back, then this is very hard to do. And also some ideas just come from when you're stretching your legs in between meetings in different parts of the office, which doesn't happen if you're stuck to your chair. So I think now I kind of try to manage a balance. I stopped using Calendly, which is this tool I use for people to book on my own calendar, because I send it to just shorten the cycle, the process
the friction,
of finding
right?
stuff. The problem is they always book it in the wrong time. Like it's free in my calendar, but I don't want a meeting there. And obviously it's too late, and then I don't want to tell them, oh, can we move it? Because then, like, why do you send a Calendly link at all? So this is something that is unsolved to me. Like I need Calendly with common sense, which I guess it's an assistant, but I don't want an assistant. So yeah, somebody has an idea, I'm open to suggestions.
You should build an MVP. Yeah, no, but I have the same problem. I stopped using it at the beginning of the year because it was, sometimes I would even get like a double booking. I didn't think that was possible, right? Or any weird situations, or it doesn't take into account the local holidays, for instance. So people would be booking me on Semana Santa.
Recently was a good example.
That was a really good example. And another thing is that I wanted to comment is, from a manager perspective, right? A lot of people, when we've been hosting these online events, and the first two were solely about remote work, they were like, how do, the dreadful question of how do I know whether my employees are working or not, right? I mean, I think we can skip that phase, but
hopefully.
Hopefully. But in your case, you might be, so how do you calculate productivity? That's something I get every day or every week. How do you calculate productivity? And has it changed, or are you measuring the different KPIs in your team during this situation? I don't know if you manage, you're using sprints or what kind of other, quality measures.
How do you calculate productivity was a nightmare question at my previous company, which was a project management software, collaboration software about productivity. And that was the question that huge companies would ask when, they were thinking of spending $1 million in a productivity software. So I never had
That's from
the
client perspective. That's from the client perspective.
I know, but in general, I never found the answer to how do you calculate productivity. I don't know. So at Factorial, actually, I don't calculate productivity. Maybe the exception to that would be sales, because sales do have like sales quotas, and
exactly.
It's very like, it's euros, it's revenue, how you calculate productivity of a sales rep. In the other teams like marketing, they produce content. I guess we're kind of on the same productivity level as before. In product development, which is the largest part of our team, I guess you could count features, but that's not really productivity. Productivity would be having impact in customers, right? So having outcomes. And this is really hard to measure, as in like, we did this pull request or we did this new design and this is the impact it had on customers. So what we're actually doing
has changed, right?
Huh?
The roadmap has changed.
Yes,
it's been affected.
The roadmap has changed. The team has grown. And we also implementing new methodology. So like, I cannot answer your question to how do we calculate productivity, but what I can say is, since I cannot do my typical management style of having these more casual conversations and kind of getting a feeling more, using more intuition and stuff like that, it's been a great chance or timing to deploy new methodologies or new tools that I had kind of in the backlog. So one of them is OKRs. So as a way, it's also the team has grown, right? We were 20 plus last year. Now we're 76, like, crazy team growth. And just to make sure, not to control what everybody's doing, but to make sure that they know that what they're doing is the right thing. We are using objectives and key results, which is a transparent, lightweight objective management system that just tells everybody the company cares about this, and then teams say, I will care about this, which is related to what the company cares about, and then individual contributors say, I will particularly care about these things, and this is how we will measure my own progress against that. So we just deployed OKRs 2-3 weeks ago, which has been going really well already, but let's see. They say it takes 2 to 3 quarters to see the real impact, but so far I'm quite happy with how things are going. And then I'm also dogfooding, and we're using performance reviews. We just launched this feature in our own product, which allows companies to launch performance surveys to their employees. So I launched one, or we launched one 10 days ago, that basically asks everybody in the company how they're feeling, how is their remote environment setup working, is there something they're missing, is there something their manager can be doing to help them be more productive, happier in their position, and so on and so forth. And people have really, like, my biggest surprise is some insights, some useful knowledge came through this survey, but the biggest impact and the biggest surprise for me is people really appreciated that somebody formally asked them how they're doing, to each and every one of them. So now we're going to be doing a lot more of that kind of, formal surveys and performance surveys and feedback cycles and stuff like that through our own product. Of course, that's why we have it.
And how about, like, I suppose that these OKRs and the KPIs that you were using at the beginning of the year are substantially different from what you're measuring right now, right? Which ones have been affected and which ones are measuring you right now that you didn't take into consideration before?
So the ones that didn't change at all is our strategic roadmap, because we had a very clear, very long-term product vision. And actually, well, the only thing it changed is we're hiring faster than we expected. So we're shipping more than we originally planned to. The things that we have changed is, for instance, since we are postponing sales conversations right now with our extended free trial, we are measuring ourselves against activated companies versus closed contracts, right? Because we're not closing, well, we are closing contracts in the future, but we did these adjustments. We also focused on parts of the product and communication of business problems that affect remote companies, that affect companies doing restructuring and stuff like that, which is obviously now much more on demand than it was 2 months ago, or than it will hopefully be 3 months from now. So we reprioritize things to make sure that we can be especially helpful in these tough times when it comes to HR challenges.
And how about the tools to measure this? That's one of the first questions we got from our Greek friend, Jordi. How are you doing? Are you using any software to track the OKRs?
We are in the process. So the whole process was, first we use Google Docs to draft the company objectives and then the team's objectives. Then I've seen that some teams went straight to Airtable to kind of write their own objectives and their key results. And as a management team, we're trying GTM Hub, which is an OKR software, very easy to use, very lightweight, and it has some cool features such as it integrates into some KPI software, so it can automatically update the key results. So GTM Hub would be the one specialized software.
Okay, yeah, I remember I was involved in a conversation with, I think it was Pau from your company, right? Yeah. Product guy, if I remember correctly.
Pau was the CTO, one of the founders.
CTO. And the thing is, I remember that we were talking about the source of truth, right? Especially in remote environments, it's more important, but like every company should have a single sort of truth, right? And while some companies have got Slack, and that's the most toxic thing I've ever heard, I think you're using Airtable, right? Can you describe what you're using Airtable for in your company? Because I remember like there were a lot of things that you were using Airtable for.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned Slack. You know, we love Slack. It's useful for
because you don't pay for it, because
exactly.
you don't want to go
we
back
don't want
to
to pay for it.
Great.
Not for saving money, which is also a great side effect, because we don't want people to store content in Slack. So when somebody asks for a paid Slack version, we say we're not going to pay for it, and you know, we can pay for something else that stores information, but not Slack. So we use Google Drive for like the longer format, Excel documents, slides, and so on. But we use Airtable for almost everything else. So product backlog is in Airtable, marketing content plan is in Airtable, backtracking is in Airtable, release management is in Airtable, even our own investment fund, tracks deals in Airtable. So we really use Airtable as this like, Excel spreadsheet with forms and with reports and with smart formula fields and stuff like that. And yeah, actually, I'm quite sure we're still at the free tier of Airtable.
Wow.
And it's incredibly
powerful. Pretty powerful. It's pretty powerful. I'm using it a lot for, like, recently I built a ticketing system for one really fast project we needed to build, and it was using the no code infrastructure, basically Typeform, Airtable, and then we integrated with GitHub as well. So are you using also that? Are you using Zapier to integrate all the things with Airtable, or are you doing custom integrations, knowing that you're a highly technical team?
Zapier.
Okay, what other tools, what other problems have you found? Like, this is a question coming from Germán, is what other, because you pinpointed certain problems with working with clients, right, when working remotely. So what are the main problems you've seen other than implementing the tool itself while working remotely? So have you seen any change in the client onboarding recently?
I mean, the good thing is we've never had a face-to-face relationship with customers. So we sell worldwide from Barcelona, so we don't fly to see our customers usually.
But maybe somebody doesn't have some tools at home, whereas they had them in the office, right? I don't know.
So that hasn't. So the core parts haven't changed that much. What has changed is that, as you mentioned right now, our customers are struggling at the moment in general. Companies are struggling because, if they're, doing hard HR decisions, then they're very busy with them, and you don't want to bother them too much with onboarding, something, although it could help. It's like the guy pushing a cart with square wheels. We could help them, but they're too busy doing it offline to embrace a cloud solution. And then the other thing is some onboarding documents. They're harder to find right now because they are typically somewhere in the office or in somebody's computer. And now, if they're not properly organized in the cloud, it's harder to find. But those are anecdotes. In general, we haven't seen much of an impact there. We keep using phone and Zoom with our customers, and obviously email, as we did before.
And how about the clients adopting remote work themselves? How is this affecting their use of your platform?
So, I mean,
has anything changed, or?
Yes. So e-signature usage has increased a lot because this is something you cannot do if you're remote. You cannot sign physically, so you have to sign digitally. Then also our solution is especially good at clocking in and clocking out from different locations. Many companies had fingerprint presence tracking, which since the time and attendance law in Spain as of 1 year ago was implemented, many companies bought this fingerprint scanner at the entrance of their offices, and our solution has always been to embrace employees clocking in from their phone, from their computer, and so on. So this has also seen an uptick. Many companies who, first they didn't want to use the fingerprint because of touching and potential contagion. Now they're just not going to the office anymore. So this has also seen an increase. But other than that, if you use Factorial, you're already kind of like using the cloud and distributing your information.
Is there, that's strictly related to one of the questions we've got via the Q&A. By the way, if we're going to go into the last 10, 15 minutes of questions, so if you want to send your last questions to Jordi, please do it through the Q&A widget. So there's a question by Dave. Is there still a perceived issue of their personal and private employee data being in the cloud versus on-premise? Do you think this is still happening, this conversation? You mentioned that you're not working with enterprise, so maybe that's not so much of an issue, but how about
our customers are what we would say mid-sized companies. So from 100 to 1,000 employee companies, typically. This really depends on geography. Like in North America, absolutely no.
They don't care about privacy in America. Like,
well, and they're kind of more used to the cloud as well. But you're right. In Spain, it's pretty much over. needs to be a very old traditional manager who asks about the cloud. Most people know that the cloud is more secure than their own server in a closet. When somebody asks about the security of the cloud, I ask them how many armed guards they have protecting their servers, because we have a lot, because Amazon's data center in Frankfurt has like military protection, and I'm quite sure their closet server doesn't have that. Then there's countries like Germany and Switzerland where they're still a little bit more conservative, and I would say the last 2 to 3 years has been, you know, moving fast towards being cloud friendly, but there the conversation comes more often. And actually that's why we chose to have our data center in Germany, kind of like the most concerned country. So to everybody else in Europe or in the world, we say, you know, Germany is a pretty reliable, I don't know, like stable country and strict with privacy. So our servers are there. And to German companies, we tell them our servers are here. So you must trust your own government or your own local infrastructure for privacy, and they do actually. So I think that was a good call.
That's a good call. That's a really good answer. Actually, I didn't know about this military thing with Amazon, so I'm pretty sure I will be using that and will be paying you royalties for this every time I give this answer. Every company has been cutting costs in terms of, you know, offloading, not only offloading people, which is bad enough, but also, you know, providers or services they don't need anymore. And I was wondering, what did you do in this regard as a company, right? Did you reduce costs in any kind of area in the company? Maybe you don't spend that much in marketing, or you double down in marketing, but you cut cost on some SaaS that was not strictly necessary?
Yeah, so we're mostly in an investment phase, and our strategy was already about investing. So we didn't cut any investments at all. We didn't really cut costs because we don't have, like, you know,
necessity
optional costs. No, and we don't have costs that are not bringing value to the company. And if we do, we would always cut them, crisis or no crisis. So the thing we did is we stopped hiring in sales, and we slowed down hiring in some other areas. So that was as far as we went in terms of cutting, which is not cutting, it's slowing down, increasing the spend. But this is pretty unique to our situation as a startup, and, you know, having just received investment and so on. Of course, that's a completely different story. If we have 3 months of runway, then I would tell you we would cut everything except for the most critical individuals to make it or break it in the company.
Exactly. How did your company culture help you in this process? Was it particularly useful for people to transition to remote, or if you can talk 1 minute about this?
I think now we're large enough that there's a bit of everything. Some developers loved it, and at the first hint of you might work from home, it's like they all gone. You know, like in the development floor, it was absolutely empty after my first email. Some other areas have struggled a little bit more. Like people who are more on the phone and they need to chat with each other to kind of confirm things quickly and stuff, they have struggled a little bit more. So it really depends on the function and the person. I think culturally, the largest learning is, and you know, I'm also positively surprised how important it has been to develop and project empathy. Like we're also, you know, helping our customers with HR, with payroll, you know, with things that are very sensitive, especially in times right now where some people are cutting down on payroll and they're doing layoffs and stuff like that. So like projecting extreme empathy to our customers and always trying to go the extra mile is, I think, something that culture needs to be there. Otherwise people just say, yeah, I don't care, you know, like, you know, they're struggling, they can wait. So we try to be there for our customers as much as possible.
Yeah, it's a great tool for people to take decisions, right? Especially when, you know, when you don't have further help. It's like, well, I know our culture tells me to do this, so I will just do it, right? Couple of really quick questions. First of all, coming from Clement is, did you stop the payroll payslip product?
Yeah, no,
I don't even know about that, so you tell me.
No, so we have changed the pricing of our product, especially last year during 2019. There was quite a lot of evolution in how we package our products. So we solve HR problems for mid-sized companies around the world, right? And one of these problems that our customers have is running payroll. So what we did mid last year is we repackaged our product. So instead of being an all-in-one, which includes professional services and the software, we packaged only the software, and then we partner with other vendors to do the professional services. So at the beginning, we were offering like professional services plus software. Now we're doing software, which is the high margin scalable part of the business. And we're partnering with multiple professional services providers, which helps us, scale, because otherwise developing and scaling a professional services organization in-house is, hard to scale actually. And second, it helps us with internationalization. We have customers from, I think, 45, 46 countries right now. And we cannot offer professional services to all of those countries, or we could, but we would need to have teams in all of those countries. So for that, we are outsourcing or partnering the services part. And this is actually what led to the acceleration of growth, and why we went on fundraising and so on.
And so you mentioned that you stopped hiring sales, but you mentioned that also that some other parts you're still hiring, right? And which profiles are you still hiring?
So software development is
Great.
the one that we hired the fastest. I think we set ourselves a goal of hiring 8 people in the quarter, and we hired 10 in the first 2 weeks of the month. So like this is the one we're going way faster than we originally expected to, basically because Pau, our CTO and co-founder, has built a huge, amazing pipeline of software developers. And we also actually embraced remote as a hiring policy, meaning we don't look for people to come to Barcelona. We look for people who would ideally come to Barcelona, but not necessarily. And this is the part of the company that's growing the fastest by far. So yeah.
And last 2-3 questions. The first one comes from Fernando, is that he's interested in knowing more about the dilution of the founders share with the fundraising process. I don't know if you can tell something about that. I seem to know, I'm aware that you've got a pretty clean cap table. So how's it going? How much can you share about that?
So dilution sucks, obviously. Yeah. We hate dilution, but we like investing. So, you gotta choose. So we choose to have, actually one thing that happened in both of our funding or institutional investor funding rounds, the seed round and this round now, is we ended up raising more than we went out to raise. And now it proved to be especially good news because, the whole fundraising ecosystem, as we were discussing earlier, is going to be kind of dead or like harder for a while. And having raised more than we needed is definitely interesting right now. So we dilute ourselves enough to be able to execute our most ambitious plan. We care a lot about control of the company. So not just financial ownership, which obviously also, but control of the company. So when I say we, I mean as founders, we're 3 founders. We want to make sure that the company's future is in our hands and that anything that happens to the business is going to be our fault, right? So we don't want to be able to blame some evil, bad investor for making company decisions. So that's an important aspect when it comes to dilution. We don't want to lose control of the company. As a board, as cap table, as weird control, veto rights and stuff like that. This is something that we fought very hard for in both rounds. And this is something that surprisingly, the investors you want, like the best reputation investors, will not be against you on that. The most mediocre investors will be surprisingly heavily attached to these draconian terms. So it's like, they become more apart, right? So you want the good investor because they have good reputation, and then you work with them, and then you realize, this is a great investor to work with. So yeah, my recommendation is like, if you need money, get money. But if you can choose, fight hard for a good investor, because this will allow you to get much healthier terms. And it doesn't mean better selfishly for the founders. It's better for the company, in my opinion. Like if this company depends on us, we're here all day, every day thinking about the company. Our investors are thinking about other things. So I think it's better for the company if we have the last word on what's happening in the business.
And clearly,
one last comment about dilution.
Yeah.
One last comment about dilution, and I don't know if we're running out of time, but one thing that we've done is many investors, especially the good investors, don't care so much about valuation, but they do care about ownership of the company. So they want to own a significant stake of the company so that the company goes public they get 20%, 10%, 15% of that IPO value increase or markup. And that doesn't mean valuation. And that's something that I think many people don't understand. You can make your investors get a larger stake without having to decrease the valuation. And this is something that we have done. And I think, I'm quite happy how things turned on. We have, rotated investors. So the investors that came in the first rounds left in subsequent rounds, which means that we didn't have to dilute ourselves as founders more for the investors to own more of the company. So
they just replace investors.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is called secondary transactions. So instead of putting money in the company, they also put a little bit more money into buying out existing investors. And this allowed the valuation to stay as you want, but their ownership percentage to go higher to fit their expectations. And this is something that allowed us to close investors who wanted percentage ownership that was higher than the dilution we wanted to accept. And then business angels were happy to get a very high multiple from when they originally came in, and they're kind of letting the bigger investors to take the ride.
Cash out, right? It was pretty quick because the company hasn't been around for that long. So it's okay. Two last questions, our signature questions at Startgrind Barcelona. First of all is, what's your most expensive fuck up, professionally speaking? And can you quantify it? Where did you squander the most money, professionally speaking?
So we're going to focus on Factorial now because I'm sure I did a lot of expensive fuck-ups in my short life.
No worries. What's the most
expensive? If you
want
about Factorial, and there is one that I don't know how we could have avoided it, but when we started the company, I think we nailed the problem we chose to work on. So the problem that companies have is huge, and there is a lot of value to add there. But we definitely didn't nail the way to capture the value, meaning the business model. So the most expensive fuck up, if you want, has been how creative we got with the business model when we started Factorial. The cost of this fuck up is time, and time is absolutely everything in life and in business. So we wasted time chasing a business model that didn't.
For how long?
End up 1.5 years. Wow. We pivoted already once during these 1.5 years, but that's the downside. The upside is maybe the way to get to where we are today was to start there. You never know. Exactly. Like I'm not a very big, I don't believe in regrets. You just do stuff and move on. So that was probably an expensive decision, but I don't know if we would have gotten here without that fuck up.
No, and that's good, because a lot of people seem to be concerned about nailing it from the get-go. That's not going to happen. Like literally no startup ever has gotten to where they are, if they're big, especially from the business idea, business model, product, team, pricing, naming, whatever, URL, like domain, from what they had on day one. And the last one is,
as an investor, we discuss very often when you look at somebody's pitch very early stage, and it's like, no, but look at the unit economics of this business model. And I always say, look at Factorial's unit economics when we were doing our angel round. It was a disaster, and everything was wrong eventually.
Everything's going to change. Everything's going to change. And the last one is, Jordi, everybody has got a useless superpower, right? Something you do exceptionally well, but it's fucking useless, right? Like knowing the wrong songs in the karaoke, or mispronouncing a word every time you just say it, or losing socks. What's your useless superpower?
Wish I had more time to think of more, but there is one that comes to mind because it surprised some people. I have terrible memory in general. Like, you tell me something today and in a month we see each other and I will not remember half of the things you told me. And this happens, with like things.
That happens with CEOs pretty often. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it is somehow.
I think it's an entrepreneur thing.
But I do have an insane photographic memory for numbers. So I might see you typing, I don't know, like your mom's phone number on your phone. And somehow 3 years later, I will still remember that number. And I remember many of my primary school friends' phone numbers I remember some of my oldest clients' passwords when I used to do web development when I was like 16, 17 years old. I would log into their FTPs and I would eventually remember their passwords, and I still remember them today. And I had a couple of cases where people asked me if I had this password written down somewhere because they lost access to the server, super common.
And you have it here.
And I didn't have it written down, but I remembered. So this is like a very weird kind of memory feature, which is mostly useless.
Whose mom's numbers do you remember? Because that was an example.
Sounds weird when you're 30 plus. I mean, I'm
Sounds
talking
weird.
about when I was like 6 years old, 8 years old.
All right. Thank you very much, Jordi. It was a lovely chat. It was really intense and really interesting. Thank you, everybody, for attending. See you on Thursday with Mariano Nájles from Las Moons. We're going to be having the same conversation, this time in Spanish, but how to navigate this crisis altogether. Thank you, Jordi, once again.
Thank you, Alex. If anybody wants to pick up the conversation, Twitter at Jordi Romero, and I'll try to answer there. Thank you. Perfect. Have a good day.
Same to you. Have a lovely day, everyone. Bye-bye.